Hello, Panthers. We're going to start today with watercolor lesson number 4. Isn't this a beautiful scene here with the sky and a little bit of a sunset going on in the background and then the reflection in the water of the sky? I have a couple of different versions of this painting that we're going to do today. This is one I did a couple of years ago, and then this is one I did earlier. So isn't that cool? Now we've got the blue up here and the orange up here, and you can see how it reflects in the water. So what you have up here, you're going to want to see a mirror image of it, as close as possible down here. But the shapes won't all be the same because, as you know, water has motion and moves. Got some little birdies drawn back here that I just did with my pencil. So let's get started. Put this up here. Okay, you should have in your kit a 9x12 piece of watercolor paper. And you'll need to get yourself some kind of a fork. Let me show you what we're going to use it for later on. These little weeds that I've got here are scratched into the soft paint, and we'll do that at the very end, the very last thing we do. So go find you some kind of a sharp fork. You have your watercolor kit here and your water and a paper towel to lay your brush on. Okay, to draw our scene, it's very simple. I didn't include a sketch with this because it is so simple. Okay, find your way about 1/3 of the way up, or a little bit less, and put a little reference dot here. We love our reference dots. Now go over here and approximately across it. You can be a little higher, a little bit lower. Make another reference dot. And then you're going to just draw a little horizon. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want it to be real lumpy, because remember, it's kind of a flat terrain there. And then coming down, let's look at the sample again. We've just drawn this, and now we're going to put a reference dot here, here, and here, and then draw the rest of our little shoreline here like that. Okay, let's put a reference dot about here. Come down a little ways, about here, and another one about here. And coming across, just don't worry about being perfectly straight, and kind of angle down towards your reference dot here. Now when we go to connect our dots, we don't want a straight line here because the shore is going to have a little bit of hills and rises. So we want this area here to be real skinny and kind of coming down like this. And if you want, you can kind of have a little chunk sticking out, make it kind of pointed. Come back and maybe another chunk sticking out. And then to here, and then off to the edge of your paper about like that. So here you have your sky, which is the prominent part of the painting, and then our little lake reflected here, and then the ground. So before we start painting, let's lighten our reference dots a little bit, so they're not so dark, and we need to tape our paper down. If you have some kind of a board, that's a good thing for this kind of wet in wet work. So get you some tape and put it on the back of your paper. We've got some over here all at the ready. And you'll want to do all 4 corners of this one because it's bigger than the other pieces that we've done. And also it'll put one in the middle, and that'll help keep it from lumping up too much. And remember to put your name on the back. Some work has been coming in and hasn't had names on it, and that kind of worries me because I can't ask you in class, is this your painting? Because you're not there for me to ask. So make sure that everything you turn in has your name on it. When you get ready to press it down, press it in the center first, and then go out to the edges like this, and use your fingernails to kind of burnish it down so that it'll stay put when it gets all wet. Okay, we've got that all done, and we are ready. The 2 colors that we're going to use for this painting, for the sky and for the water, looking back at the sample here, we're going to use orange and blue. And as you know, orange and blue are opposites on the color wheel. Now that gives us a really cool contrast, which makes the painting real interesting to look at, but also it can spell danger because when you mix 2 complementary colors too much together, you kind of get mud. I think some of you have experimented with that concept in the classroom a little bit. So we'll be real careful to blend our colors, but not mix them so much that we get mud. Okay, if you have your paper on some kind of a board, kind of turn it sideways if you're right-handed, so you'll have a little bit of a slant. You can set something under it, or you can just hold it with your hand. If you're left-handed, you're going to want to do it this way and paint like this. And the reason we're using the slant is because we want the, let me grab my sample here again, we want the paint to crawl. You know how watercolor does its magic and it crawls. And if your paper is slanted ever so slightly, then as we put the orange on, it'll kind of crawl down. And then we put the blue on and lay it flat, and it kind of crawls together without blending too much. It's such a neat concept. Okay, you know how we've done wet in wet, which means we're going to wet the whole sky, then we're going to lay our orange down on top of it and blend it just a little bit and let it start crawling toward the top of it. Then we're going to put it down and then lay some blue in. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is we're going to wet the entire sky with nice clean water. And go right along your horizon that you've made, kind of carefully. And before we go our second step, we need to make sure that this is completely dry. Some of your work has come back and it looked like some of your layers weren't completely dry, and they tend to bleed together. And that can kind of mess with our effect here. So I'm going to get this whole thing completely wet. And you know, you can tell if it's wet is if it's shiny. And be very, very gentle. It's real easy with your paintbrush to push too hard, and that kind of roughs up the surface of your paper and damages the surface. And then your paint starts acting kind of weird. Okay, I got a little drop there that I don't like, so I'm just going to wipe it off with my finger and go back along right along my horizon with a little bit more water because it's trying to dry out on me. Okay, there we go. Got that all nice and wet. Now we're going to set the pencil aside, and I'm going to moisten my orange. Now, we didn't moisten it ahead of time because we don't want it really, really, really bright like we do for some other projects. Then clean your brush completely and then lay some water in. Remember, very carefully, we don't stir and we don't dig. We just lay water in the blue. And we won't really use all that much blue. A little bit goes a long way with this blue. Okay, your orange. And I didn't get my brush completely dry, completely clean. Okay, I'm going to start laying a little bit of orange right along the horizon line. Painting very carefully. And when you come out of your orange, just touch it on the side of the little divot there so that you're not dripping in the middle of your sky. Because we sure don't want a big orange blob in the middle of our blue sky. Right along there. See, it's already starting to crawl. Starting to look cool. This part over here closer to me, isn't that awesome? Right along. And if it's not crawling, if it's doing that, get you some clean water and just kind of lay it in there and make sure you've got enough water that the paint can crawl around. It looks like that whole area's gotten dry. So I'm just going to blop some water in there. We'll have a little bit more orange along there, but that'll be cool. So you want to have these kind of little veins coming out. See how that is? That's just cool. Now let that set for a minute. And while you're letting that crawl on down, go along the rest of your sky and make sure that this part that's not painted yet is completely wet while this is crawling down. Okay. I'm going to put just a little bit more. I'm getting just a tiny bit of orange. I'm going to make it just a little bit darker right here in the middle. And it's still plenty wet, so I won't get a big chunk of paint. This will crawl down in. And don't pick it up too high. We don't want to have great big rivers of orange going up through our sky. A little bit along here. All right, that's very good. That is excellent. I'm going to leave that alone now. Wipe my brush and lay it there. Okay, now I'm just going to lay this down very carefully. Now we're going to do our blue, but we're going to be real careful to paint from the top down so we don't get too much mixing. Oh, look what's happened here. We want to go ahead and lift out some of that. So I'm using clean water and just kind of pushing it away. We'll have a little bit of orange up there, but if we get too much, you know what happens if you mix complementary colors, you might get kind of a mud. Okay, that should do just fine. Okay, got some blue. I'm going to start from the top, and we don't want it to be real bright. Oops, see, it's drying on me, isn't it? These hot lights that I have here in my studio, so you can see what I'm doing. It's kind of drying things a little bit fast. Right along here, the top of the sky, and I'm just going to kind of push it down very gently. It's a feather touch, just very gently encouraging your blue. And I've laid my board down, and remember to keep all your strokes horizontal so it kind of will look like clouds. You come down a little bit close to the orange. We don't want it mixing in too much. I'm going to get just an teeny weeny bit more. There we go. Got that kind of going. Maybe to keep it from looking like a couple of stripes, maybe I'll put a little bit extra there. First, getting plenty of water. Just giving that a little bit of variety in the sky to give it some interest. Okay, it's pretty much time now to let this set. Now this stage has to dry completely before we move on, or there's a chance that we could damage it. You might want to put a little bit more in the corners. It's a kind of an unstated thing, or sometimes it's stated in landscape paintings. You kind of want to make your corners a little bit darker, and that helps to guide the eye back into the center or the main part of your picture. Okay, at this point you can pause the video. I'm going to keep mine running, and I'm just going to let it sit. Actually, I think I am going to pause it because it will take a while. Oh, look, it's starting to do cool stuff right there. It'll take a while for this to dry. If I were you, I would pause the video and leave it for an hour or two. In fact, I don't even want to use a hairdryer on it because I love the magic. I love what's happening here. And the hairdryer can kind of push the water around, and then you won't get this natural walking or running of the water. So I'm going to pause the video here. Okay guys, we're back after this has gotten completely dry. If we were in the classroom, we would do this one week and then the next step the next week. I've noticed that I have kind of a little bit of harsh lines, kind of a puddle that formed here, and it's not that big a deal, but if you get something like that that is on yours and has some kind of harsh lines that don't look right, you can blend those a little bit by getting just a little bit of water and then very gently just kind of massage that paint around so that it's not quite so clumped up in one spot. Moisten it and then go back to your horizontal brush strokes and soften that just a little bit if you want to. There we go. That looks like it might turn out a little bit more natural looking. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn it right side up this way, and we're going to do the same wet in wet for our little lake here, but I want you to notice how we're going to put this down. Notice how we've got the orange reflecting here, and then we've got the blue reflecting here. So we'll wet the entire area, the same technique as we used for the sky. We'll do the orange first, and then we'll take the blue, and then let them run together a little bit. Okay, nice clean water on your brush, and start painting in with just plain water, painting in your lake. Kind of go over your pencil lines a little bit. When we paint the ground, we can cover up any extra pencil lines so that they won't show too much. If they show a little bit, it'll just look like a little weed or a rock or something. Go ahead and get this whole thing all wet. Take your time. If you need to pause the video, remember all these videos are designed so that you can pause them if you need to. Don't worry too much about this little area right here. We can reshape that when we paint the ground. If you somehow get water slopped over that, and I just got some on my ground, but I need to wipe it off because I don't want my water bleeding into my ground, my lake here. Up here it's starting to dry already a little bit, so I'll put a little bit more right along my pencil line and clear off the edge of the paper. Okay, it's looking pretty wet. Look, it's getting dry over here again though. Soaking it right up. Must have been thirsty paper. Okay, got it all nice and wet. And remember, our next step is to lay in some orange. Make sure that your orange is nice and moist. It may be overly moist now, so you may want to be careful that you don't get too much. Get just a little bit of orange and start about right here so that you're in control of your paint. And very gently paint back up into this little inlet and just kind of dab it along there. And then right along your edge, just like we did for the horizon up there. It's already starting to do its crawling around thing. That is just looking so cool up there. I just love this. All right, along our ground. Okay, and then kind of blend it up into here, and then let it do its crawling around thing. Okay, now we're going to make sure, clean my brush and make sure all the, oh, I see a dry spot there. The way the light glares, it may be hard for you to see on mine what's wet and what's dry, but you can kind of look at it from the side, look at yours from the side, and see what's wet and what's dry. Okay, nice and wet here. Remember, we don't want to use too much blue because this blue is real intense. So get some on there, and I did get quite a bit, so I'm going to spread it out right up to the ground here. Maybe a little bit more up in here. If you get a big blob like that, make sure you blend it into the water before it has a chance to dry. And then just kind of encourage it up there, but we don't want it to mix too much. Remember about complementary colors and how if they get too friendly with each other, it's not a pretty sight. Okay, right up next to that, like I said, when we do the ground, we can reshape any of the water here that we don't care that much for. Okay, that part is finished. We're playing the waiting game again. This has to be completely dry before we paint our ground. And I see some little snakes that are kind of coming up here, maybe more than I want, so I'm just kind of lifting them out with my brush, and I'm touching my brush. My brush is dry, pretty dry, and then just wiping it on my paper towel, just to kind of encourage it to do what I want it to do. Okay, we're waiting again. You can use your hair dryer if you wish, or you can pause the video and go do something else. Go outside and play. The weather today is absolutely gorgeous. I hear it snowed north of here. I remember one year, several years ago, we had a white Easter. And I have a picture of Mr. Davis sitting on our deck in a white robe, blending in with all of that white snow around him. It's a pretty fun picture. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here, and then you guys can let yours dry, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, we're ready to get going again. Make sure before you do this last couple of steps that your painting is completely dry, especially along the edges. Because if we put our dark brown and black mixed together, and if it's not dry, it'll wander out into the water and it'll make kind of a big smudge. Let me get my sample and show you what we're doing next here. This is a cool part. Okay, this is the part where we're going to be doing the ground. And do you notice that I have lots of lights and lots of darks there? It kind of looks like places where maybe where there's some little rocks, or maybe where the lights are hitting this. Maybe this is a little bit of grass growing down in a little hole in the ground here. All of that is just basically the magic of watercolor. I didn't engineer that. I guided it, but I didn't really engineer for all that cool stuff to happen. So let's do this on your painting. Making sure by running your finger along your horizon line and all the way around your lake, make sure everything is completely dry. I see kind of a shiny spot there, but it is completely dry. Now this technique for the ground is not wet in wet. This is wet in dry. So you're going to take a little bit of water, moisten your brown, and just a tiny bit on your black. Oops, I got some brown paint in there. The black is so intense that it actually won't hurt anything. If the black being so intense, we use just tiny little bits of it. Get my brush nice and clean, and I'll put a little bit more in the brown. Okay, as you get paint in this step, you're going to need to be very careful that you don't drip it into your sky or into your lake. That, a big blob of brown paint might be kind of distracting. So go ahead and take some of your brown and go right along the top here. And you have to keep going back and getting lots of water because we want this to flow together, but we're not doing the wet in wet technique that we did with the sky and with the water. See how I'm just kind of very gently, very slowly with a feather touch, just kind of laying in some brown here. And if it starts acting a little bit dry, go back and get some water, touch the side of your water vessel so you're not dripping, and then take your water and spread it around some more. Okay, I've got some brown in here. I'm going to add just a touch of black. It doesn't take much at all, just to give it some variety, kind of give it some shadows with our highlights. In fact, you can see how little black it took. I'm going to spread some of that way over here. Get some water. Lay in a little bit of water as we go. And you want to kind of cover up all your pencil lines if you can. Get a little bit more brown. I got some light spots I want to get. Very carefully and very slowly. A little bit more water along here. And go back and touch your brown. The brown and the black have a lot of pigment in them, and it doesn't take much to get lots of nice color. Be very careful you don't splatter your paint. Got some brown or black there. I'm going to blend that in. I think I had too much black, so I'm going to clean my brush. Go back and lift some of that out. There we go. Take my paper towel. I want some more black later, but I don't want too much black up there. Okay, I lifted some of that out. I'm going to go back and get some brown. There we go. Blend that brown in with the black. It's looking a little bit better now. Getting lots of hills and valleys. I know the glare of these lights is making it look kind of weird until it dries. But when it dries, you'll be able to see how cool this is looking. All the way up to here. It'll cover up all your little white spots. Get some water. Lay it in there. A little bit more brown. And remember to keep your strokes horizontal. Right along here. I think I'll go back and grab that little white spot. Right along the edge of our lake here. Another tiny touch of black. Boy, it's easy to get too much black. Just get like 1 or 2 molecules and then spread it way around. Coming out here like this. Now this is the chance I told you, if you want to kind of reshape your little fingers that go out into the lake, you can kind of do that now. Like I want mine to go out just a little bit further, and maybe this one just a little bit further, so I have a nice inlet, and so you can see how it kind of comes in. Keeping your strokes horizontal and very carefully covering up all your little white spots. Right along down here. Keep going back and blending so you don't get any big clumps. Get some brown. I'm going to need some more water here. Get in my brown. Okay, we're just about to close in on this project. I think I'm going to wipe my brush and straighten this out just a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural. The fingers coming out on a lake like that are little pieces of land that are sticking up just barely above the water. And you want to keep them real long and skinny. Okay, laying in some more brown down here. Remember what I said about the corners of a landscape painting? You kind of want them a little bit darker than the rest. And the reason for that, if you remember, is to help guide the eye back into the center of the painting. So I'm just kind of blending a little bit of the extra black along there. Grabbing some water. We're going to finish this up here, right along my shoreline. Get some brown, put it in there. Right along there. That's looking a little bit too light, so what do you think I need to do? I've got my brown. You think I need to go back and get just a tiny baby bit of black? Let's go ahead and moisten that first. Tiny bit of black. Boy, it's hard to get a tiny bit. I got too much. I got to wipe it off in my paper towel. It is fun to watch it kind of crawl around up there. Get a little bit more brown. There we go. Now I got it going on. Watercolor is very forgiving. It's just one of my favorite mediums to work with in art. Okay, that part is done. Now, before anything dries, remember the fork I had you get. You're going to get your fork. We're going to use it like a pencil. Hold it like this. You can see I got paint all over this. I've used this fork for lots of different things. And looking at our sample, we gotta do this relatively fast because you gotta do it before the paint dries. I'm drawing little pieces of grass that just go up and kind of curve them, and you don't want to make them too tall. You don't want to make them look like trees. Just little chunks of grass. Okay, let's see. Let's have some grass. You kind of scrape it like that. See how I'm doing that? I hope you can see it in the video. It'll show up better. I almost waited too long. There we go. Now I got some of it showing up. Just some little pieces of grass. You want to be careful that you don't, you're damaging the surface of your paper just a little bit, but it won't hurt anything. There we go. Got a little bit of grass growing in there. And when that dries, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. Okay, now I have on my sample, I have some little birdies that I drew here, and I did those with my pencil. And the pencil works out really slick because you don't want the birdies to be solid black because they're way off in the distance. And as things get further away from you, they get smaller or lighter or both. So I'm going to just use my little pencil here that I drew my landscape with. And when you make a bird, let me get a piece of scrap paper here. Well, I'll just use it right here. When you make a bird, you don't really want to make an M bird like that. Those don't look very realistic. A better kind of bird is almost a V shape. And then if he's real close and you can see part of his body, you can just give him a little bit of a body there. But the birds that we're going to be doing here are going to be smaller than that. So just kind of a V and then a little bit of a body. You don't want it to be big and obnoxious. You want the birds to be way off in the distance. So maybe about right here, do a little V, maybe a little bit bigger one here. And this one's close enough that maybe you can see part of his body. And then little ones, and as they get further away, they get smaller and they get lighter. So just barely touch your pencil. Those birdies are way off in the distance. Got some little birdies going on. And if you want to do a little tree, make sure it's real small with your pencil once again. A few little branches going up in here. I'm just barely sketching. You know how when we sketch, we just barely touch the paper. And there's just kind of a hint of a little tree. Maybe some little grassies back here, kind of like what we did up here. These little addition things you can do if you want. Just kind of adds another level of dimension to your painting. Okay, we are finished with this now. And as it dries, your grass is going to show up a little bit more, and then of course it won't glare with the wet of the water. But that's it. Watercolor project number 4. I had fun doing it with you guys. Remember to praise God, stay inspired, and keep making art.